The moment Daniel Carter stepped into the restaurant wearing a simple black delivery uniform, he never expected the night would become the most humiliating moment of his life, and the moment that would change everything forever. It was a busy Friday evening at one of the most expensive restaurants in Manhattan. The golden lights reflected off crystal glasses while wealthy guests laughed over wine and expensive steaks. Daniel walked carefully between the tables holding a delivery bag, trying not to disturb anyone. He had been working 2 jobs ever since his father passed away and the family business collapsed, leaving him and his mother with nothing but debt. Delivering food at night was never part of his dream, but survival doesn't ask about pride. As he approached the reception desk, he heard a voice that instantly froze him in place. "Wait, Daniel, is that really you?" The voice was followed by laughter. Daniel slowly turned around and saw 3 people sitting at a table near the window, his former college friends. But they weren't the same people he remembered. They were dressed in expensive suits, surrounded by luxury watches, designer handbags, and the kind of confidence only money could buy. Ryan Walker, the loudest among them, leaned back in his chair with a smirk. "Wow, the guy who used to talk about building billion-dollar companies is delivering food now?" The table burst into laughter. Daniel felt his face burn, but he forced himself to stay calm. "I'm just here to deliver an order," he said quietly, trying to keep his voice steady. But Ryan wasn't finished. He stood up, grabbing the delivery bag from Daniel's hands and lifting it like a joke trophy. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ryan announced loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, "meet Daniel Carter, the genius entrepreneur who now brings us dinner." More laughter echoed across the restaurant. Some guests turned to watch, curious about the scene unfolding. Daniel could feel every eye in the room on him. His heart pounded, but he refused to show anger. Instead, he simply reached for the bag and said, "Please give that back. I need to finish my job." Ryan finally handed it over, but not before shaking his head in mock disappointment. "Man, what happened to you?" he asked with fake sympathy. Daniel didn't answer. He walked to the reception desk, handed over the order, and signed the delivery confirmation. But as he turned to leave, Ryan's voice followed him again. "You know, Daniel," he called out, "if you ever need a real job, my company might have an opening, maybe cleaning the offices." The table exploded with laughter again. Daniel stopped for a second, his hand tightening around the strap of the empty delivery bag. 1,000 memories rushed through his mind. Late nights studying together in college, business ideas they once dreamed about building together, promises they made about becoming successful. But life had taken different paths. Without saying a word, Daniel walked out of the restaurant and into the cold night air. The laughter still echoed in his ears as he stood on the sidewalk under the streetlights. For a moment he felt the weight of everything. The failed business, the debts, the humiliation. But then something inside him changed. Instead of anger, a quiet determination began to grow. Because what Ryan and the others didn't know was that Daniel Carter had just closed the biggest deal of his life earlier that same week. The delivery job? That was temporary. The old car he drove? Also temporary. In fact, the company Ryan bragged about working for had just been quietly acquired by a private investment group. And the new owner of that group was someone Ryan never imagined. Daniel Carter. 3 months earlier, Daniel had been sitting in a small apartment with peeling paint and a laptop that barely worked. After losing the family business, he had spent months studying markets, technology trends, and investment strategies. While everyone else slept, Daniel worked. While people laughed at his situation, he rebuilt himself piece by piece. What started as freelance consulting turned into startup advising. That advising turned into equity shares in small tech companies. And one of those companies unexpectedly exploded in value after a major software contract with a global firm. Overnight, Daniel's tiny percentage became millions. But instead of celebrating, he used that money carefully. He partnered with investors, created a private acquisition group, and began buying undervalued companies quietly. One of those companies was Ryan's employer. The deal had been finalized just days ago, but the public announcement hadn't been made yet. Standing outside the restaurant, Daniel looked back at the glowing windows where laughter still filled the room. Ryan and his friends had no idea who they had just mocked. Daniel could have walked back in and revealed everything right then. He could have embarrassed them the same way they embarrassed him. But real power doesn't rush to prove itself. Instead, Daniel simply smiled slightly, climbed into his old car and drove away. The next morning, Ryan walked confidently into his office tower downtown, expecting another normal day of meetings and corporate bragging. But something felt different the moment he stepped into the lobby. Employees whispered. Managers rushed around nervously. A large email had just been sent to the entire company. Ryan opened it casually on his phone, but within seconds his smile disappeared. The message was short but shocking. The company had officially been acquired by Carter Strategic Holdings, and the new CEO and majority owner would be visiting headquarters later that day. Ryan frowned, trying to remember the name Carter. It sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. Meanwhile, at the top floor of the same building, executives prepared for the arrival of their new owner. Black cars pulled up outside. Security tightened. When the elevator doors finally opened in the executive lobby, every department head stood waiting to greet the man who now controlled the future of their careers. The doors slid open slowly, and Daniel Carter stepped out wearing a tailored suit, calm and confident. Gasps filled the room. A few executives recognized him from recent financial news interviews. But the real shock was waiting downstairs. When Ryan was called to the executive conference room later that afternoon, he walked in expecting to meet a powerful investor he had never seen before. Instead, he froze in the doorway. Sitting at the head of the table, reviewing documents calmly, was the same man he had laughed at in the restaurant the night before. Daniel looked up slowly, meeting Ryan's stunned eyes. The room fell completely silent. Ryan's face turned pale as the realization hit him all at once. The delivery driver, the man he mocked, was now the owner of the company that paid his salary. Daniel closed the folder in front of him and spoke calmly. "Good afternoon, everyone," he said. "I'm Daniel Carter. I believe some of you may already know me." Ryan couldn't say a word. For the first time in his life, the confidence he always relied on had completely disappeared. Daniel wasn't angry. He wasn't loud. But the quiet authority in his voice carried far more power than humiliation ever could. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't proving people wrong in the moment. It's succeeding so completely that the truth reveals itself without you saying a single word.